Base Building with Daisy. Building Skills.
Surface tiles are a great tool we have, and I want to show you some of the many ways that these items can help you in base building. Surface tiles are flat, two-sided surfaces that act as floors, so most objects can be set directly on top of them, and they have a grid that measures off feet. These come in a variety of sizes, from a 32-foot square, which is the size of most floor tiles, to a 512 square foot tile, which creates a very large surface for building. There are two types of surface tiles. Both act as floors for placing items. Both have a grid, both can be tinted, and both come in the same sizes. But the surface tiles with collision, (COL), stay visible when you are not in the editor. Surface tiles are green and white if you do not tint them. Surface tiles with collision are red and white if you do not tint them, so you can tell the tiles apart right away if you have clicked the wrong one. Surface tiles with collision have collision even for when you are in the editor. They are meant to be able to be stood upon while editing. However, this means you will not be able to move through them at all while editing, and that can be frustrating, so just be aware. You can use the surface tiles with collision as a part of the base. It was not designed for this, so the lighting does not react the same way with a surface tile with collision as it does for the rest of the objects from the editor. But if you tint both color panels the same color, the tile becomes a solidly colored tile, useful for floors, walls, ceilings, and cityscapes at the least. The default position for a surface tile, or how it comes from the editor, is flat, parallel to the floor. Since it acts as a floor, this makes it perfect for use as a sort of scaffolding. Using a surface tile as your floor at whatever height you're placing items at saves you from having to lift each item into place, and it keeps the height absolutely consistent. This is very handy when working on builds that have multiple objects placed at different heights in a pattern that repeats. Having such a large tile, the 512-foot size, makes it very easy to create a large building surface at whatever height you want. If you'd like to build high above or below the base, this is when you'd want to use the surface tower, which also comes with or without collision. Since the entire surface of this acts as a floor, and the surface tiles attach with floor attachment, you can just lift your surface tile using your mouse to get it to the height you'd like, and then click to place. You can use the surface tower as a scaffold for other structuring, but each of these levels is the height of an entire physical base, which is much more space than you'd need for each level of a realistically sized building. The basic purpose of the tower is to provide an easy way to place a surface at the level you'd like it to be at, and then it's best to just delete it so it doesn't get in the way of trying to place things. Extra floor surfaces can make placing objects more difficult than it needs to be, since most things place by floor attachment. Surface tiles are a great way to keep multi-level builds with repetitive items consistent. When I built my chapel in the woods, I had to create 15 double arches that were all the same from small dock posts. This involved placing two posts at precise angles at the exact same height with the exact same angles on either side of the arch until they met in the middle. So I set up floor surfaces because surface tiles weren't here yet, at the level where each new angle would start. I then made sure to keep those floors at that same height and marked down what angle the posts would be for that height. If I were doing it now, I'd take advantage of the fact that I can color them differently, because different colors would help me keep track of which tile was for which level. You can use these the same way when creating an arched tunnel with wall pieces. Using tiles at different levels is an easier way to build something that has multiple parts that have to connect as they go up. Here I'm using different tiles as the starting point for walls angled the same number of degrees on each side. Then I use a surface tile I've tinted pink as the marker for where the walls meet at an angle, so it's the same place on both sides. As I complete the arch, I realize that the sides are farther apart than I need them to be for the size top piece that I have. So I move one side over, which is easy because I have all of the placements marked. So all I have to do is hold Control and slide each piece into position. Lettering is another way that surface tiles can make placement easier. The technique I use that helps with lettering is to use surface placement. Place the letter on the tile, hold Control, and then place it on the surface you are lettering. Holding Control will keep it at that same level. This works also if you put the letters on floor placement, but floor placement comes with automatic orientation that faces the same way every time. And if it's not facing the direction you need, you'll have to angle it to get it going the right way. So surface placement is easier. If you then wish to have just the surface of your lettering show, which I definitely suggest with the small and medium-sized letters, you'll need two surfaces when lettering: the surface you are using to place the letters and the surface where you want the letters to show. Place the surface you're using to place the letters so it's behind where the letters will show up. You want this placed so that it's almost the full depth of the letters you're using. That way the front face of the letters will still be visible and you can see the lettering. Or you can move the surface you want the letters to show on back to do the lettering and then up so the letters don't stick out. But let's say that you want to letter a wall or a surface that's already placed or is a base wall and you want to make the letters even with the surface so their sides do not show. First, let's look at lettering a base wall. If it's a wall on the outside edge of a room, you'll find that you can't sink the letters into the wall. But if you have the space, you can add a room and/or a doorway that will allow you to set the letters into the wall. First, be sure you place a surface on the wall so you can see where the letter face needs to be. Use an upright surface tile behind where you need the letters to appear as your lettering surface. The easiest way to make sure you have the proper depth is by placing a letter so that it's as deep as you want and then bringing the surface tile up to the back of the letter so that any other letters placed on the surface tile will show where you want them to show through. Then, if the front surface is in the way, lift or click rotate it out of the way. Set up your surface tile for lettering the same way we did for the tiny lettering. Slide your letters into place, then pull down or click the front object back into place and your lettering is done. The grid can also help you in centering what you are lettering. The process for lettering when it's not a base wall but the wall is already positioned is similar, but you don't need to add a room usually. If you are building something like a building or stacking things and you want the easiest way to make sure everything is lined up, turn that surface 90 degrees until it's upright. Depending on the item and where it's programmed to interact with floors, items will either line up with their surface on the upright floor or their middle, and usually it's the middle. Remember, each item of a different size will have a different middle point relative to the other items. So as you place items, you'll either have to change to a different surface tile if you change the item you are placing, or place all of each type of item before moving on to the next item. As I build this city building, I can quickly place each item where I want it, and it's automatically set to the correct depth for what I want. Here I have set up quite a few color-coded tiles to help me build the storefront. Matching colors tell me which set to use for height and depth. Placing the item on the horizontal surface puts it at the height I need for that item. And then I do any manipulation that's needed, such as laying something down or angling it, and then I hold Control and move it over to the upright surface tile where it will easily go to the exact depth it's set to. And all I need to do is move it left or right until it's placed where I want it to be placed. You have to hold Control so that the item you're moving doesn't move up the floor once you get to the upright floor. I use at least 2 upright surface tiles for the depth stops, so I can move one left or right as needed and not lose the position I want. I also move these up out of the way if I need to get to a deeper surface tile, and then back down again when I need them. I keep the grid off when I'm using 2 tiles like this. They give me precision in my placement without having to measure and place things based on a grid. Grids are wonderful for lining things up automatically, not as wonderful if you're creating things that need a slightly different measurement or have angled pieces. And if you've placed it off-grid, if you have the grid on when you grab and move it, you can shift its position. So I always have my grid off for moving the tiles around. I do use the grid when placing things in a straight line, either side to side or stacked, as it's often the easiest way to place items without overlap and exactly lined up. This is what works for me. I recommend finding what settings work well for you. Just be aware that if you are fighting a piece that won't go exactly where you need, you might actually be fighting a grid setting. Unrelated to surface tiles, I want you to notice what I'm doing here when placing the pieces where I want them to be. This building has surfaces in front of the surface I'm wanting to use to position the pieces. Now currently I'm using floor placement, so my piece is going to attach to something that's a floor, but there are other pieces the editor sees as a floor blocking me from placing this piece at the depth I want. Rather than moving all of the surfaces in front of the piece I need for placement, I make sure to have a piece that is the correct depth sticking out above or below where all of the other surfaces are in the way. Now I place my piece at the height I want it to be at. I hold Control and place my mouse above on that surface I have sticking out that's the correct depth. This holds my piece at the level I need it while giving me access to the surface I need to use for the placement I want. Positioning the working surface below the placement also works. It just depends on which works for what you're doing. By using Control to hold a piece at the level you want, you can use any surface that's above or below to position a piece, even if something is in the way. This works as long as the piece you're using for positioning works for the attachment type you're using. You'd only need to either do this technique or move things out of the way if you have multiple items of the same attachment type in the same area, as I did here. Another way around the problem would be to place an item the editor sees as a wall back where I want things to attach, and use wall attachment because items that are looking to attach to a wall ignore things that are floors that might be in the way. But keep in mind, for placement purposes, they tend to stick to the wall on one side. Floor attachment often is the midpoint of an item, so these will attach and place differently depending on the surface you're attaching them to. When working on a large item such as a city building, I prefer to use the surface tiles because they can cover the entire area, so I'm not having to put up multiple walls to get the same effect. Back to using the upright surface tile, there is a technique we like to call the squidge, named after Squidget, the builder of the pagoda and cascades, and this allows for precise alignment without flicker or glitching. Here's the thing, when you use the shift key to lift things, it will lift in increments. Even with grid snap disabled, the smallest increment is still quite visible. Now you might have noticed that with the grid off, moving items horizontally along the floor tile is very smooth and has no increments. Well, now if you put that same floor upright, we find we can move things up or down just as smoothly. This allows us to take advantage of the fact that when we place a piece that was flickering in a position that looks like the same position it was in to us, to the computer there are still a few decimal points of difference, and so to the computer that's a different position and the flicker disappears. This technique also works to move something slightly forward or slightly back with an angled surface tile. Hold Control to prevent an item from changing height, and the movement follows the cursor, but because you've added more possibilities with the angled surface, the item now does not just slide side to side, but can also move forward and back as the mouse moves along the angled surface. Using the surface tile as a positioning piece for things when you're doing multiple placements that require the item you're placing to be angled the same amount each time, or things that would usually have to be angled on two axes, can make that go faster. When angling the same item on two different axes, using the surface tile for the first one will also avoid the wonkiness that can happen with angling the same item twice. And finally, back to the surface tiles with collision. As I said, they stay visible outside of edit mode, and since they can be tinted, you can use them in the base. These are the best source of the large solid black surface you'd see, such as for a tunnel interior. Some people also have used the black surface tiles for asphalt roads. A word about using surface tiles: they have not been programmed to respond to lighting. Watch here as this cycles through day and night. I have placed other items that do respond to lighting on the color swatches. Note the color changes in response to the ambient lighting on the items other than the surface tiles, especially notable on the gray and white colors. The letters for all but black are exactly the same shade of the surface tile, but as you can see, they appear to be very different colors. The tiles, meanwhile, stay vibrantly the color they were tinted, and it is clear that this is what makes them the perfect backing for windows in a cityscape, as you see here in Midtown, an award-winning base on Everlasting. However, especially with the gray, note how it looks rather brown, especially next to other items that are gray. Outdoor lighting changes tone throughout the day, and since these tiles have not been programmed to respond to light, as the tones around them change, theirs do not, and so the result is that the change in the colors around them makes them not blend in well. This is especially apparent when most of the setting is made of objects that do respond to light. This will only be seen in outdoor lighting. Indoor lighting flushes objects with a consistent white or colored light, so tones won't change once set. Light settings under Options are for the entire base. So yes, you could use these for walls, ceilings, and floors, but test the colors and keep in mind your lighting type. If you've ever had problems with grass sometimes having slight gaps, placing a green surface tile underneath the grass is one surefire way of knowing that no one is distracted with these slight glimpses of light slivers. You could even use these tiles to create the illusion of a blue sky where you can usually see no sky, as I have here, or the illusion of a space view where there is no window to see the stars, and a sand-colored tile under muddy water can look a lot like sand. And those are some of the ways that surface tiles can make your building easier. Let me know in the comments if there's anything that I didn't think of that you use surface tiles for. And thanks for watching.